Blue Sky 4, this is U.S. Navy warship.
There are certain moments in world politics, those pivotal moments when the patience of great powers runs out, words lose their meaning, and are entirely replaced by steel, technology, and irreversible steps taken on the ground. And right now, we have just crossed that threshold. The months-long tension, the secret negotiations behind closed doors, and the endless standoffs have finally come to an end. The crisis between the United States and Iran has moved beyond a diplomatic chess match. It has entered a direct, tangible, and military phase of confrontation. Before us lies a blockaded Strait of Hormuz, a radical Tehran regime kicking the negotiating table, American robots clearing underwater mines, and an Iranian ship seized in a 6-hour, breathtaking operation. If you're ready, let's break down this chain of unbelievable events that unfolded over the past 48 hours in the lifeblood of the global economy, the turbulent waters of the Middle East, second by second. To understand the military activity on the ground, we first need to look at why the table was overturned. For a crisis to be resolved, both sides must be willing to sit at the table, right? However, the latest signals from Tehran indicated that all bridges had been burned. Just recently, U.S. President Donald Trump issued a very clear, well-defined ultimatum to Iran. Washington's demand was simple: either accept the blockade and new sanctions, or sit down at the table and back down. However, Iran's leadership interpreted this call not as a way out, but as a deadly American trap. According to highly critical intelligence reports leaked by Axios, Iranian decision-makers view sitting down at the table with the U.S. as a surrender trap that would spell the end of the regime. This perception is so deeply ingrained that Iran's official news agency, IRNA, announced to the world that the Tehran administration had categorically refused to participate in a second round of talks with the U.S. The chronology of U.S.-Iran talks, which have been fluctuating since the start of the conflict, has now been officially thrown out with this decision. So, why has Iran hardened its stance so much? Because a silent yet profound earthquake has occurred internally. Esteemed viewers, states radicalize not only due to external pressures, but also because of internal dynamics. As noted in the Wall Street Journal's legendary analysis, the regime's chemistry in Iran has changed, and for the much worse, shifting toward a far harsher line. The hardliners have completely taken over the state. By refusing to back down on the Strait of Hormuz, they are staging a show of force against both domestic opponents and the world. At this very point, I'd like to ask you, in your view, what does a state that's cornered, facing an economic downturn but politically radicalized, do when it walks away from the table? Does it retreat inward? Or does it step onto the field to play its most dangerous card? Let's discuss in the comments. How do you interpret this psychology? When diplomacy ends, soldiers take the stage. And those soldiers took the stage on the night of April 19, 2026. When the calendar read April 19, 2026, an unprecedented game of nerves unfolded in the waters of the Middle East. Seeking to break the massive naval blockade declared by the U.S. and test its limits, Iran sent its ship named Touska into the critical waters of the Strait of Hormuz. This was no ordinary civilian passage. It was a chess move designed to gauge Washington's resolve. However, the U.S. did not turn a blind eye to this move. According to breaking news from the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. military intervened against this Iranian vessel attempting to breach the blockade, and history was made. For the first time ever, physical force was used to halt a blockade. President Donald Trump stepped before the cameras immediately following the operation to personally confirm that U.S. forces had seized an Iranian ship attempting to evade the blockade. This was the official declaration that the rules of the game had changed.
Motor vessel Touska, vacate your engine room. Vacate your engine room. We're prepared to subject you to disabling fire.
Friends, this operation didn't end with a simple announcement. According to a First Post report detailed by CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command, a tense standoff lasting a full 6 hours unfolded in the middle of the sea. At the end of those 6 hours, U.S. Marines boarded the Touska in a professional operation and took complete control of the vessel. The seizure of a nation's flag-bearing vessel by Marines sends a very strong message in military literature. Moreover, this is just the beginning. According to information leaked by officials, the U.S. military is preparing to raid and halt many more Iran-linked vessels in the coming days. We are no longer facing merely a warning America. We are facing an America that directly boards ships and takes the helm. So why couldn't the Iranian Navy respond to this seizure with massive warships? Why were they forced to merely watch from a distance? Because the real battle is not taking place on the surface of the water, but beneath it. What is Iran's biggest trump card against the entire world? The threat. I'll close the Strait of Hormuz. But how will they close it? Of course, with those massive and terrifying sea mines. As the Wall Street Journal's excellent analysis noted, sea mines are among the most powerful, asymmetric, and cheapest weapons in Iran's arsenal. Hundreds of mines deployed in the Gulf's narrow, shallow waters could paralyze 20% of global oil trade overnight. Yet there is an incredible strategic paradox here. Stop for a moment and think logically. If Iran mines the Strait of Hormuz, it will block enemy ships. Great. But how will it sell its own oil? How will it handle its own imports? This is precisely the reality highlighted in that magnificent article in Foreign Affairs. The Strait of Hormuz is, for Iran, less a weapon and more a massive weakness. You cannot intimidate your enemy by cutting off your own lifeline. Closing the strait would mean Iran's economy committing suicide by its own hand. Nevertheless, in response to the possibility that the radicalizing Tehran regime might make a suicidal move by laying mines at sea, the US launched a massive technological countermeasure. Instead of risking human lives, they deployed the technology of the future into the waters of the Gulf. The US Navy has officially deployed high-tech unmanned autonomous robots to detect, neutralize, and clear potential sea mines in the Strait of Hormuz. These robots can patrol underwater for weeks on end without tiring, without fear, and without needing to change shifts. Thanks to their AI-powered sonar, they detect even the slightest anomaly and immediately report it to clearance teams. Imagine this. Your opponent has been producing mines for decades and has built their entire strategy around them. You, however, use a few unmanned robots to throw your opponent's biggest trump card into the trash. That's how modern warfare is won, friends. Not with brute force, but with superior technology and asymmetric intelligence. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, now is the perfect time to click that button. Join us to read the moves of the global chess game before anyone else, with the most accurate analyses. You can also help spread this information to more people by clicking the like button. Now let's shift our map a bit further south to that other critical strait where the crisis has spread. Wars rarely remain confined to a single front. When Iran found itself cornered in the Strait of Hormuz, it deployed its proxy network, those loyal pawns, as it always does. Eyes immediately turned to Yemen and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the key to the Red Sea. The Iran-backed Houthi militias in Yemen issued a harsh ultimatum directly targeting US President Trump to ease Tehran's predicament. They didn't stop at words. They threatened to completely close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, another vital artery of global trade, and turn the region into a hellish zone for commercial ships. This move by the Houthis was a strategically brilliant plan, keeping America occupied in two different seas, at two different straits, all at once. They sent the message, if you squeeze Hormuz, we'll choke the Red Sea. However, Washington's response to this bluff did not come in the form of diplomacy or condemnations. The response arrived in the form of a 100,000-ton steel behemoth, a floating military base. In the face of these simultaneous threats from Iran and the Houthis, the US military deployed the world's most advanced, deadliest, and most expensive war machine, the USS Gerald R. Ford Aircraft Carrier Strike Group, to the Red Sea for direct strike operations. Esteemed viewers, the USS Gerald R. Ford is no ordinary ship. With over 70 state-of-the-art fighter jets, electronic warfare systems, and the destroyer fleet it brings along, it is more powerful on its own than the combined air forces of many countries. The US sending this ship to the Red Sea with Strike Operations Authority sends a very clear message to the Houthis and Tehran. If you want to play in both straits, be prepared to fight on two fronts. On one side, Marines seizing ships in the Strait of Hormuz and mine-clearing robots. On the other, a massive aircraft carrier anchored in the Red Sea. The noose is tightening. If you think I'm only talking about two straits, two narrow waterways, Let's expand the bigger picture a bit, friends. Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. One carries 20% of the world's oil trade on its shoulders, while the other forms the heart of Red Sea trade, that massive container traffic linking Europe to Asia. The simultaneous threats from Iran's radicalizing military leadership and the Houthi militias in Yemen are not merely a random outburst of anger. This is a massive global blackmail scheme known in military literature as the Two Straits strategy. The target isn't just Washington. The real targets are China, whose factories will grind to a halt, Europe, which will struggle with an energy crisis during the winter months, and all Asian economies whose supply chains will be paralyzed. 20 million barrels of oil per day. Please commit this figure to memory. If these two straits simultaneously turn into actual conflict zones, kill zones, do you know what will happen in global markets? The price of a barrel of oil will skyrocket to astronomical levels within hours. Global inflation will surge again, shipping costs will quintuple, and no central bank in the world can stop this geopolitical tsunami by raising interest rates. This is the real reason behind the United States setting aside diplomatic niceties to seize the Touska vessel with Marines, deploying autonomous mine-clearing robots to the Strait of Hormuz, and sending a massive aircraft carrier to the Red Sea. The US is not merely punishing Iran. It is also sending a message to global energy markets and its Gulf allies. Your oxygen tank is under my control. Don't panic. Because the day a superpower can no longer provide security guarantees to its allies and global trade, it loses its status as a superpower. The Washington administration is declaring to the world that billions of dollars worth of commercial cargo and oil tankers cannot be left at the mercy of a few fanatical groups or a radical regime in those narrow straits. So how do you interpret this equation? Is America's massive military buildup and its effective seizure of ships a necessary surgical intervention to prevent a global economic crisis, or a spark that will set the entire region ablaze? In this dual strait crisis that will directly impact even our own country's economy, do you think energy prices can weather this shock? Let's discuss this economic and military chess game together in the comments section. I eagerly await your valuable insights. You can help keep these in-depth analyses coming by clicking the like button, and by subscribing, you can become part of this strategy family. I'm Charlie. Keep your mind and vision sharp. See you in the next critical analysis. Stay safe.